In absentiam informed that he is chairing a Senate meeting. Permit me also to acknowledge Professor Penina Alo-Pudo, the DVC, Dr. Mwenje, academic staff who are here, and the students who are here. I'm very glad to be present with you this morning, and it's also not lost on me that this is a day that is reserved to honor women internationally. And it's only fair that we acknowledge our women. They are our mothers, they are our sisters, and for those of you who are married, they are your wives. And it is indeed the great Mahatma Gandhi who said that any society that does not pay regard to its women is a society adrift, a giant headed to the rocks. And I think that there is merit in that. But let me start by, first of all, recognizing that what is happening in this university is what ought to happen in Africa. I travel a lot in Africa. I think I'm one of the most traveled young Africans because people are youth up to age 65 nowadays. So if you look at 65, then I'm still a youth. But if you go by the UN definition, I'm not. But in the last 1 year, I've traveled in over 25 African countries. And if you permit me to brag, I think last year, the New Africa magazine did recognize that I'm one of the 100 most influential Africans today. And the reason why they did that is because I have a passion for the continent of Africa. And I've traveled, as I've said, to many African countries. And what strikes me is that Africa is the youngest continent. And when we talk about the youngest continent, we are saying that perhaps 70% of Africans are below the age of 35. We are over 1.2 billion Africans. The question is, what are we doing to improve our lot? Just to give you an example, right now, in a country that is known as Norway, their sovereign fund, fedha ambazo wameweka kama akiba, is 1 trillion United States dollars. 1 trillion United States dollars. They are about 5 or 6 million, which means that if you are to divide the money that they have kept away, every Norwegian would receive $190,000. That is a country that is moving in the right direction. Let me come back home. And we are one of the better African countries. Don't forget. You only don't appreciate this country when you have not traveled to other African countries. When you do, you know that this is one of the better African countries. But today, if we were to divide our debts, because we have no money, we have debt.
I like it.
Each one of you would have a debt of 100,000 shillings, excluding the help debt which you have. So when we talk about innovation, we should be asking ourselves, what is it that we can do to improve our lot? 2 days ago, on the 6th day of March to be exact, 61 years ago, Ghana became the first country in Africa to regain our independence. And I want you young people to take time and read the speech that was given by Ghana's Kwame Nkrumah 61 years, 2 days ago in Accra, Ghana. He was addressing young men. At that time, there was only one university in Ghana. But if I remember very well, Kwame Nkrumah said many things. But he reminded his audience that the reason why they had fought for independence was that they could use their resources to improve the quality of the people's lives. And one of his secretaries reported about 2 years after they had regained their independence, or is it about 4 years, when the great Akosombo Dam had been built to generate electricity for Ghanaians. She remembered that one day they were driving in the streets of Accra with Kwame Nkrumah. And there was a young man sitting under an electric post, reading at night from the light in the streets. And she remembers Nkrumah saying, one day, every household shall have electricity, that they may read from the comfort of their home. That was 61 years ago in Accra, Ghana. 2 years later, not 2 years later, I think it is 4 years later, after Ghana had attained her independence on the 24th day of May, on the day of the founding of the Organization of African Unity, the same Kwame Nkrumah, with a sense of urgency, addressing the 32 heads of states and governments who are gathered in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, said, among other things, that we are gathered here today first to demonstrate to ourselves that we are capable of governing ourselves, and that going forward we must improve the quality of the lives of our young men and women. Kenya was not independent at that time. But several years after the founding of the Organization of African Unity, Kenya attained an independence on the 12th day of December 1963. And one can still hear the words of the first Prime Minister of the Republic of Kenya, Jomo Kenyatta, telling the people and reminding us that our independence had been regained. He did not use the word regained. And he reminded us that we've got to go back to the land so that we can develop. So that the reason why we attained independence was that our young men and women could participate in the project of building Kenya. At that time, on the occasion of the independence of Kenya, not like today, there was no Luo, no Kikuyu, no Kamba, no Kikuyu. There were only Kenyans. Today, it saddens me, even in universities such as these, that you organize yourselves around Nyeri Students Association, Kisumu Students Association, very primitive enterprises. I would myself love to hear that we have sociology students, agriculture students, history students, engineering students. That is what we ought to be doing. And if you doubt that it can't be done in this part of the world, you go to Tanzania. You don't have Sondusa, South Nyanza Students Association. Those are primitive enterprises. You don't have Kirinyaga Students Association. Yet, when we gained independence, the clarity of the vision of the people who led us into independence was that we should be united as a people. But united in our diversity, which is very important, so that the Maasai can celebrate their culture, so that the Kikuyu can celebrate their culture, and the Kamba and the Kikuyu and the Mijikenda And it is in that diversity that we acquire our strength. It is Kenya's Ali Mazrui who has written a book. It is not the Tower of Babel, it is the power of Babel. And I think there is power in Babel if you harness it. At that time, there was possibly only one university, the University of East Africa. Subsequently, we had the University of Nairobi, and then, of course, Moi University and Kenyatta University. Today, we have nearly 68 universities, giving opportunity for young men and women to acquire knowledge. But for what purpose are we acquiring knowledge? This is the question that we must ask. Several years down the line today, we have produced doctors in their thousands. Yet, when we are sick, if we can afford it, we send our sick to India. Several years down the line, we have produced many graduates in agriculture. Yet, China, with a population of 1.4 billion, still donates rice to us. Several years down the line, we have produced engineers. Yet, several years down the line, if you go to the streets of Nairobi, it is the Chinese who are building for us. Several years down the line, we have produced civil engineers. Yet, if you go to the streets of Nairobi and even the roads that are being constructed, it is the Chinese. Several years down the line, we have produced people who are in textile technology. Yet, you and me and many of us who are present here, when you talk of buying a new dress, it is only new in the sense that it has newly arrived in Kenya. Otherwise, it has been worn by some European and they are tired of it. And they are dumping it in Africa. Our textile industries have collapsed. If it is not Mountex, it is Rivertex. If it is not Rivertex, it is some other company in Kenya. They have collapsed. If you go to our supermarkets and you look at the labeling of the toothpick which you use after consuming meat, they are made in China. Toothpick. That is the Africa that we have. All of you and most of you are here. In your minds, there's been planted the seed that upon graduation you will be employed somewhere. In 1978, when I was a Form 4 student, China was a backwater country which was not famous for anything other than the Red Book of Chairman Mao Zedong. Today, China is the leader. Today, if you look at mobile telephony, and most of you here will have mobile telephones, half of the telephones that you have are either Huawei or Techno. In our very lifetime, the Chinese have succeeded into getting into that arena of technology. In 1980, when I was a Form 6 student, there were student riots in South Korea to protest against the military government. South Korea was a backwater economy whose economy was comparable to ours. Several years down the line, half of the phones that you have there are either Samsung or LG. There is not a single African country that produces a mobile telephone. Yet the ingredient that is used in every phone is found in Africa, in the Democratic Republic of Congo. What am I saying? I'm saying that history has demonstrated not once, not twice, but times without number, that societies only grow on the shoulders of our young men and women. If you are readers of literature, you will remember these famous words. of Chinua Achebe, recorded in his famous book, Things Fall Apart, when one of the characters poses the question, and where are the young suckers that will grow when the old banana dies? These are the old bananas. Where are the young suckers that will grow when the old banana dies? This is the question. You will graduate from this university in a few years. Today, we as a continent, or we as the international community, recognize that we need to do certain things to improve the quality of our lives. We had the Millennium Development Goals, and now we have the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. What are we doing to ensure that we are capable of realizing those goals? At the continental level, we have Africa Agenda 2063, which is founded on 7 pillars. How many of you are aware of Africa Agenda 2063? It is the promise of Africa Agenda 2063 that by the year 2063, when all of us here will be upstairs with God, we will have a middle-level economy where the Democratic Republic of Congo will be the Silicon Valley of Africa. East Africa will be technologically advanced. West Africa will be producing cars. There'll be a road from Addis Ababa to Dakar in Senegal, another road from Cape Town to Tunis in Tunisia, and Cairo in Egypt. Will have the Central African Republic. And moving towards that agenda, if you look at one of the pillars, it says that by the year 2020, all the guns will be silent in Africa. There will be no wars. We'll be generating electricity, and we will be a middle-level economy. That is at the African level. At the Kenyan level, we have our Vision 2030, which is founded on 4 pillars: the economic, the social, and the political. And we are promising ourselves that by the year 2030, we will be a middle-level economy, that we will be a country that is worth its salt, and that socially we shall enjoy cohesion, politically we shall enjoy democratic maturity, and economically we will have pulled a critical mass of us into the middle class. China, in the last 30 years, has pulled 780 million out of poverty. Just this year, they say they are going to pull 10 million people out of poverty. The question is, what will be your role in that agenda? Some of you think you are young. If you read history, ask yourself, how old was Vasco da Gama when he was leaving Lisbon to go and look for spices in India? How old was David Livingstone? In his 20s. How old was Alexander the Great when he conquered half of the known world? He died at age 33. So you are Methuselahs, you who are 30 years of age. And yet you think that you are toddlers. I'm submitting to you that the university must become the incubator for the next generation. If you look at those who have succeeded in changing their countries and the societies in the recent past, in the United States of America, they did it while they were at the university. Bill Gates at the university, Mark Zuckerberg at the university, Jack Ma in China at the university. Some of them did not even have the opportunity to be at the university. If you ask Nigeria's Aliko Dangote, who is the richest person in Africa today, how did he acquire? These are young men who had the enthusiasm and the vision. It used to be said, a friend of mine used to say that hit the iron while it is hot. He says, no, don't wait to hit the iron while it is hot. Hit it that it may be hot. And I think that that is the attitude that we should adopt. He says, think outside of the box. And we say, no, don't think with the box. Think without it. Because when you think outside of it, you are only circumscribed to the arena around it. Think without the box. You know, perhaps you do, perhaps you do not know. But in the year 1906, a young African, a young South African to be exact, was a student at the University of Columbia in the United States. You may or may not have heard of him, Pixley Kaisa Kaseme. How many of you have heard of Pixley Kaisa Kaseme? If you have not, go and find out who this man was. This man gave one of the greatest speeches ever made, and it was titled The Regeneration of Africa. Pixley Kaisa Kaseme is considered the founder of the African National Congress in South Africa. So that by the time the African National Congress, which was famously led by Oliver Tambo and Nelson Mandela and Albert Sisulu, was being founded, the person who had spoken about the regeneration of Africa was Pixley Kaisa Kaseme in 1906, when your grandfathers were still migrating to this part of the world. They were young, and that's why I'm talking about them. Not so very far from that particular point in time, there were other Africans. How many of you have heard of a man called James Emmons Kwejiragri? If you have not heard about James Emmons Kwejiragri, normally referred to as Agri of Africa. If you go to Nairobi, there is a school called Dr. Agri in Jerusalem in Nairobi. It is named for James Emmons Kwejiragri, the first Ghanaian to earn a PhD and the first black man to be the vice principal